Both Leo and James have featured Project Zero builds in their videos over the past few months, so it's about time I got to have a play with one. So that's exactly what I'm taking a look at today. This is the Project Zero Infinity pre-built desktop from CyberPowerPC and powered mostly by MSI components. Visible cables are becoming a thing of the past, and I don't know about you, but I'm fully on board with that. Cables are so 2010. Let's find out how well the first Project Zero pre-built we've looked at on the channel performs, shall we? Hi guys, I'm Matt and welcome to Kit Guru. So before we dive in and look at the specs and the performance and all the good sort of stuff, let's get some housekeeping out of the way regarding the pricing and the warranty as well. Picking this system up from CyberPowerPC will set you back £2,469.60. There is a slight variation in the graphics card though. The system that I have for review has an MSI RTX 4080 Super Suprim X. However, this model has now been discontinued and has been replaced in the spec on the CyberPower website with a Gaming X Slim variant of the 4080 Super. The Project Infinity Zero comes with CyberPowerPC's desktop standard warranty included in that price, which covers 5 years of labour, 2 years of parts and 12 months collect and return, as well as lifetime technical support. That warranty is upgradable for either an extra £29 or an extra £99, depending on if you choose the gold or the platinum tier of their warranty. Both will extend certain aspects of the coverage. Let's take a look through the parts on offer and what exactly you get for that £2,470 asking price. The CPU is an Intel Core i9-14900KF. A side note, the PC did come with the microcode update installed when it arrived, which things are admittedly still up in the air regarding that stuff, but it's installed out of the box, so there shouldn't be too much concern over the CPU cooking itself. Anyway, this CPU is a beast. It's got 24 cores and 32 threads. Those cores are made up of 8 performance and 16 efficiency cores. The performance cores run at a base clock speed of 3.2 GHz and are capable of boosting up to 5.6 GHz. The efficiency cores run a bit slower with a base clock speed of 2.4 GHz and a max boost clock speed of 4.4 GHz. Base processor power sits at 125 watts and then the max turbo power is capable of going up to 253 watts. That processor is sitting in an MSI Project Zero Z790 motherboard, the same board which featured in James's and Leo's Project Zero builds. It's a stunning motherboard in my opinion. Being a Project Zero board means most of the connectors and the ports have been shifted to the rear, which really cuts down on cable clutter and leads to a much cleaner looking system overall. As for specs, it's obviously running on the Z790 chipset. It supports DDR5 memory. It's got a total of 4 M.2 slots for storage, all of those being Gen 4. It's got a Gen 5 PCIe socket for the graphics card, and then it's almost entirely covered in silver shielding. Around the back, in terms of I/O, you've got a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, a USB 3.1 Type-A port, a pair of USB 3.0 Type-A ports, and 4 USB 2.0 ports. Alongside the USB options, there's 6 HD audio connectors, the Wi-Fi antenna connectors. The board's got Wi-Fi 7 on board and built in. Then there's a 2.5 gigabit LAN port, DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.1 ports, and finally you've got a PS2 port and a BIOS flashback button. The graphics card, as I mentioned at the start of the video, and if you were to pick one of these systems up right now, will be slightly different to the one I've got here. If you order this system right now, you'll get a white MSI RTX 4080 Super Gaming X Slim, whereas the card I have in the system that's on the desk behind me is an MSI RTX 4080 Super Suprim X. It's a bit of a mouthful. Performance-wise, they won't be too much different, but looks-wise, I think that Gaming X Slim will better suit the system overall, as it's white and it matches the aesthetics much better. Either way, the card I have in the system here has 16GB of GDDR6X memory running across a 256-bit bus. GPU-Z reports the base clock speed at 2295 MHz and the boost clock speed at 2640 MHz. This is a pretty big triple fan card and it's got brushed metal and RGB. It looks really nice, but I'd still rather have that white card though. It'd look much better in a build like this. For memory, we have 32GB of Kingston Fury Renegade RGB DDR5 running at 6400 megatransfers. It's the white and silver variant, which fits nicely into the rest of the system design-wise. Storing everything is a 1TB MSI M450 PCIe 4.0 M.2 SSD. This is my first area of slight disappointment. 1TB is going to fill up fast. And as for the speeds, it's okay, but it's nothing amazing. Coming in at around 3698 megabytes per second read and 3236 megabytes per second write when I tested it with Crystal Disk Mark. If I were picking one of these systems up for myself, storage is something I'd definitely look at expanding or upgrading pretty quickly. Powering everything is an MSI Mag A1250GL power supply. This is obviously a 1250 watt unit that's 80 plus gold rated, as well as being fully modular and having native support for PCIe 5.1 16 pin connections. And a nice little touch is that the connectors for that high power cable are yellow, as opposed to the rest of the cable being black, allowing you to easily see if it's plugged in properly and if it's connected properly. I liked to see that. Taking on the mammoth task of keeping that 14900KF processor cool is an MSI Core Liquid E240 ARGB all-in-one cooler. This is also in white like most of the other parts. I was a little surprised not to see a 360mm cooler in here, especially considering that this is almost a $2,500 PC. But the 240 should be able to handle its task. I'll go into more detail and show you some temperatures about that and whether it did later on in the video. All of that stuff is sitting inside a white Corsair 3500X ARGB tempered glass case. I have to note that this is not the IQ Link version of this case that James reviewed recently and which I've looked at in previous pre-built system reviews before. This is the standard version, and as such, the included Corsair fans are RS120s as opposed to RX120s, which unfortunately do not support the fancy time warp lighting that I'm a big fan of. That to one side though, this case is okay. It's got front and side tempered glass panels like almost every case has nowadays. It'll support up to a 360mm radiator in the top and on the side/front section and a 120mm radiator in the back. As for fan capacity, you can fit up to 10 120mm fans in the 3500X, 3 in the top, 3 in the side and 3 in the bottom, and then a single at the back. And for 140mm, that's understandably more restricted. You've got 2 up top, 2 in the side, and then a single one in the floor. If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk. Front I/O is okay, pretty standard as we see on cases nowadays. Alongside the power and reset buttons, there's an audio jack, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A ports and a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port. To aid with the cooling, there's an additional 120mm fan installed as exhaust in the rear of the case. It's a white CyberPowerPC branded fan, which isn't mentioned on the spec sheet at all when you look at the pricing of this PC. So I guess thanks for the free fan, CyberPower. So that's all of the specs then, which is no doubt is the main area of consideration when buying or building a PC for sure. But with this being a Project Zero build, I think we have to pay extra attention to the design. Internally, it's the cleanest looking system I've ever reviewed by a long way. The lack of visible cables makes a big difference to just how good it looks. It's stunning in my opinion. The inclusion of the black graphics card in the system that was sent out to me is doing them no favours at all though. Forgetting the fact that it's the cream of the crop from the MSI 4080 Super lineup, it sticks out like a sore thumb when comparing it to the colour of the rest of the components in the case. That wouldn't be the case for anyone picking the system up now, but it is for me, so I had to mention it in the video. The case not being the IQ Link version, that's a little bit of a letdown too. If you're going to charge $2,500 for a system that's based around a new way of doing things that makes stuff look cleaner, then the case has got to be top notch too, and it feels like an area where a corner has been cut a little bit. It's not overly bad, it just could be much better. Overall, I really like how the system looks internally. I was stunned by how clean it looks when I first unboxed it. I thought my personal rig was cable managed well, but after reviewing this, it's like looking into that bag or drawer of mixed cables that everyone has. This thing puts mine to shame. Right then, so let's get down to business. How does this system perform? And as usual, all I've done before recording this review and testing the computer is update Windows before I ran the Project Zero Infinity through my usual set of tests and benchmarks. Let's kick things off, as we always do, with some Cinebench scores. Starting with a multi-core workload, the 14900KF returned a result of 35,569 points, putting it on par with the 7950X 3D, but some way behind the 14900K that was tested by Leo on the channel a while ago. Clock speeds during this test hovered around the 5.1 GHz mark after their initial boost to almost 5.7 GHz, while power usage did reach the stated maximum of 253 watts at times, but oftentimes it sat just below that at somewhere between 246 to 250 watts during that 30-minute sustained Cinebench benchmark. Single core performance when measured using Cinebench returned a score of 2,234 points, putting the 14900KF roughly 60 points behind the 14900K. Moving on to look at CPU and GPU performance in 3D Mark Time Spy then puts the Project Zero Infinity firmly at the top of the table in all departments when you compare it to the systems and the pre-builts that I've reviewed in the past. We also have to take the price into account, because as they say, you get what you pay for, and this system tops the list in terms of cost too. CPU performance obliterated anything else on the chart, with the score coming in at 22,395 points. Not only does this show just how powerful the i9 found in this system is, but it also highlights just how good that i5-13500 was for the money that I reviewed on the channel a while ago. GPU performance between the two 4080 Super systems at the top of the chart was fairly close, with the MSI Suprim card in this machine taking the lead with a score of 28,799 points. The Kingston DDR5 6400 megatransfers memory found in the Project Zero machine is blisteringly fast, recording read speeds of 101,165 megabytes per second and write speeds of 86,285 megabytes per second. And the final synthetic benchmark before we move on to look at gaming then is PC Mark 10, a good test of the overall capabilities of a machine. The scores here, which are 10,224 points overall, 12,208 points in Essentials, 12,266 points in Productivity, and 19,384 points in Content Creation, go to show that this is a very powerful machine that will handle pretty much anything you throw at it with relative ease. So there was the synthetic benchmarks. Let's take a look at gaming then. And all footage for this section was captured using an Elgato 4KX external capture card with the games at maximum settings with ray tracing and dynamic scaling turned off where applicable. In Modern Warfare 3 at 4K, the Project Zero Infinity manages FPS of around 120 to 130 with dips to roughly 100 at times when the scene gets particularly demanding. Turning the resolution down to 1440p nets a rough gain of around 40 to 50 FPS, with peaks hitting around the mid 180s and dips dropping down to roughly 120. Cyberpunk 2077 is a different story though. This game brings even the most powerful of systems to their limits. At 4K the FPS hovered between the 50 to 60 mark, with occasional dips into the 40s. Now I've got to be honest, I expected a bit more from this system in this title at this resolution. Turning things down to 1440p does see that FPS pretty much double though, running at around 120 most of the time throughout this car chase scene from early on in the game that I used for testing. F1 2024 performance then is a much better experience as I expected. Running at 4K in the built-in benchmark, it starts out at roughly 150 FPS but constantly climbs throughout this built-in lap, reaching a peak of just over 200 FPS when in the nose camera view. Switching things to 1440p, and that'll add about 100 FPS onto the performance, starting off at 240 roughly and reaching a very impressive peak of around 315 FPS. These results say a lot about both the performance of the system and just how well the F1 2024 game is optimised. Assassin's Creed Mirage brings things down quite a bit. At 4K, performance was around 90 to 100 FPS while running through the game's built-in benchmark, which features quite a lot of NPCs and camera panning. Dropping the resolution down to 1440p nets a gain of around 50 FPS, with the benchmark running at about 150 FPS most of the time, with occasional dips to the low 140s and peaks up to roughly 160 to 170. Red Dead Redemption 2 then, using Vulkan and at 4K maximum settings, starts off at around 110 FPS and dips down to around 100 when you get outside and there are a lot more assets to render and process. Similar to Mirage, 1440p in this title sees a jump of roughly 50 to 60 FPS, with average game performance hovering around the 150 to 160 mark. Finally, we have Forza Horizon 5, another fairly well optimised game. At 4K, the FPS sat between the 130 to 140 area, with occasional dips down to the high 120s and then peaks up to the low 150s. At 1440p, performance was roughly sitting in the 160-ish range, with a variation of 10 to 20 FPS either side during peaks and dips. So overall then, gaming performance is impressive. Obviously things vary from title to title, but on the most part, I'd describe it as very good, as we'd expect to see from the pairing of the 14900 KF and a 4080 Super. And I'll just mention, if there are any titles you would like to see me add to the lineup of games in the future, then let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Let's move on and take a look at thermals, noise and power before we wrap up the video then, shall we? Let's kick things off with CPU package power. And when this was measured across a 30-minute test in Cinebench R23 multi-core, the processor reached its maximum boost power rating of 253 watts. Gaming in Cyberpunk 2077 saw the CPU use 122 watts roughly, while when idle the 14900 KF used 45 watts. Those power usage figures led to CPU package temperatures of 92 degrees during that same sustained Cinebench multi-core benchmark. The processor ran roughly 20 degrees cooler when gaming, hitting 72 degrees during a 30-minute Cyberpunk test. Then at idle, the 14900 KF reached a pretty toasty 53 degrees. While the gaming figure on this chart is more than acceptable in my mind, the other two figures do have me wondering if CyberPowerPC should start shipping this system with a 360mm cooler, or if you pick one up, you should upgrade to one. It would make things run a little bit cooler than that, I think. GPU temperatures were all very pleasing though. The Suprim RTX 4080 Super reached a peak of 66 degrees on the GPU sensor, 77 degrees on the hotspot sensor, and 70 degrees on the memory sensor during a 30-minute Cyberpunk test. The noise that the system puts out while keeping things cool is quite notable though. When idle, it's no issue at all, sitting at around 37 decibels. That figure climbs up to 44 decibels when gaming, which is noticeable but nothing crazy. But when really pushing the CPU in Cinebench, the Project Zero Infinity desktop reaches 51 decibels, which is loud. The fan curves are being managed by settings in BIOS. Those fan curves that are set in BIOS are quite aggressive with their ramp ups. I don't know whether they've been set by CyberPower or whether they're just at their factory default. You could tweak these of course, but out of the box, this is by no means a quiet computer. Here's a few clips of the differing fan noise levels so you can hear for yourself. Finally, when measuring the total system power of the socket, the Project Zero Infinity shows just how hungry of a computer it is. At idle, things are not too bad. The system uses around 95 watts. When running through a CPU-heavy scenario like Cinebench, that power usage jumps up to 432 watts. And when gaming, it increases further, reading roughly 542 watts. I'm surprised I didn't take the grid down when running this test at my house. It's a thirsty system for sure. So there we have it. That was the Project Zero Infinity from CyberPowerPC. I'm going to start my sort of final thoughts section talking about the design. As with it being based around MSI's Project Zero sort of ecosystem, I feel that's one of the main areas that should be focused on. It's a stunning build, as I said earlier. This is the first time I've had my hands on a Project Zero PC, and I'm impressed with how much of a difference it makes to the looks of the system overall. The innards look cleaner than anything I've ever seen in the flesh. The only things that let it down for me are the colour of the GPU, which of course won't be an issue if you pick one up because you'll get the other GPU that I've mentioned a few times throughout the video. The case could be a bit better, and I think it'd look more balanced if it had, and it'd run a bit cooler if it had a 360mm AIO. Performance is stellar. There's an argument to be made on going with a 14th gen Intel CPU at the moment, but I've personally got no doubt that the issues will be fully resolved at some point. But focusing on what I have in front of me to review though, both the CPU and GPU are very impressive performance-wise, and they'll handle the most demanding titles and workloads with relative ease. Pricing is pretty competitive. As a reminder, this system costs £2,469.60 from CyberPowerPC, and pricing up a similar build using PC Part Picker comes out at roughly £2,350. So you're paying just over £100 for the convenience of having it built for you and having a licensed copy of Windows 11 Home installed. And then there's the peace of mind of the warranty to account for as well as CyberPower having to make a bit of money to keep the lights turned on. With all that being said, I think the pricing is fair. Overall then, I really like this system. It's not perfect and could have a few improvements in certain areas like the case and the cooler, but on the most part, it's a beautiful PC which performs really well. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a like down below if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to Kit Guru if you want to see more content like this and keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews. If you go down below the video, there'll be links to our merch store where you can pick up hoodies and t-shirts and stickers and mugs and whatever you want. And then in the video's description, you'll find links to our Discord server, our Patreon page, and our website where you'll find a full review of this and all the rest of our videos. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. This behind me on the desk has been the Project Zero Infinity pre-built desktop from CyberPowerPC and MSI. I will speak to you in the next one. Look after yourselves. See you later.